You ever wonder what it feels like when your own family prays you'll fail? Well, let me tell you, because I lived it. My name is Jessica Bennett. I'm 34 years old, and I am a United States Army general. But my family? They spent years telling everyone I was a disappointment, a failure, a disgrace to our military family name. The irony? They had no idea who I had become. I grew up in a military dynasty. My father, Colonel Richard Bennett, ran our household like a boot camp. My mother? She played the perfect military wife, poised, patriotic, and cold as steel. And then there was my younger sister, Emily, the golden child, the rising star. My parents called her our real soldier. Because while Emily was earning medals, I was struggling in their eyes. No one in my family ever thought I was good enough. You don't have the grit, Jess. You don't have leadership in your blood. Emily's the one who'll carry on the Bennett name. I heard it constantly. At every family dinner, every holiday, every whispered phone call my mother didn't think I overheard. What they never knew was that while they dismissed me, I was rising higher than any of them ever imagined. I kept my assignments quiet, my deployments classified, my advancements unspoken. While they paraded Emily's every achievement, I stayed silent, because real power doesn't need applause. The real break came 7 years ago. I was stationed overseas in a covert intelligence division. My work was classified, but let's just say it involved decisions that shaped global headlines, decisions my own father read in the morning paper, never realizing his failure daughter was behind them. But I never told them, because part of me, if I'm being brutally honest, was waiting for the day they'd finally see me. That day came last month. Emily was getting promoted to major. My parents threw a celebration like it was a royal coronation. They invited every friend, every officer, every family member who ever doubted me. "Are you coming, Jess?" my mother asked over the phone. "I wouldn't miss it," I said calmly. When I arrived at the base, heads turned. Not because they recognized me, but because I wore my uniform. Full dress. Stars gleaming. I saw my father first, his face tightening as he noticed the stars on my shoulders, but not fully registering what they meant. My mother froze. "Jess, what are you wearing?" she asked, her voice sharp. "My uniform, Mom." You're wearing stars? That's not funny." I didn't reply. I simply walked past her into the ceremony hall. I stood quietly as Emily's name was called for her promotion. She looked radiant, standing proud as her commanding officer pinned her new insignia. Then came the moment that changed everything. The base commander stepped down from the podium and walked directly toward me. His voice boomed across the microphone. "Ma'am, you're the general?" The entire room gasped. I smiled softly. "Yes, sir, I am." The color drained from my father's face. My mother's mouth opened, but no words came. Emily stared at me like she was seeing a ghost. And in that silent, frozen moment, I felt everything. Years of dismissal, years of judgment, years of being the shadow in my sister's spotlight. All of it collapsed. Because finally, without shouting, without arguing, without needing to prove anything, I was seen. I was the highest-ranking officer in that room. The base commander saluted me. And then, for the first time in my life, my father did too. But this was only the beginning. Because what my family didn't know was that I had been holding back something far more explosive. Something that would turn their entire world upside down. The truth about what happened 7 years ago. The secret that would expose not only their hypocrisy, but the deep betrayal hiding inside our so-called perfect military family. And trust me, you're not ready for what comes next. The ceremony ended, but the tension didn't. As the guests mingled, my parents hovered nearby, clearly uncomfortable. My mother's eyes darted around nervously. My father kept his jaw clenched, pretending to sip his drink while throwing me quick glances, as if trying to piece together how his failure daughter had outpaced even his wildest military ambitions. Emily approached me first. "Jess, why didn't you ever tell us?" Her voice cracked, a strange mixture of pride, jealousy, and confusion. I looked at her calmly. "You never asked." Her lip trembled, But before she could reply, our father stepped in, his voice stern but trembling beneath the surface. Jessica. A word.
Now.
We moved to a quiet corner of the hall, away from the guests. My mother followed closely behind, arms folded, trying to maintain her composure. I don't know what kind of stunt you think this is, my father hissed, his face reddening. Parading those stars like you've won some game. Stunt. I whispered sharply. I earned every stripe, every deployment, every classified mission. You didn't even know where I was half the time because you never cared enough to ask. And yet you stood here today, ready to celebrate Emily like she's the only Bennett who ever mattered. You were never supposed to. He stopped himself. Never supposed to what? I demanded, my voice rising. Never supposed to succeed? Never supposed to outrank you? My mother put her hand on his arm. Stop, Richard. Not here. But I was done protecting their image. This isn't just about your disappointment, is it? I stared at both of them. There's something else. I've known for years you were hiding something. My father's face turned ashen. My mother's eyes glistened with something far closer to fear than shame. That's when it hit me. They were afraid of me now, because they knew I had access to files, military records, reports, investigations they had no idea I could pull. 2 days later, back in my apartment, I finally opened the sealed envelope that had haunted me for years. 7 years ago, during my covert deployment, a fellow officer had quietly slipped me classified intelligence, suggesting there were irregularities tied to my father's name. At the time, I couldn't risk opening the file, not with my clearance level still under review.
But now?
As a general, there were no restrictions. Inside the envelope was a single letter, an internal investigation summary. My father. Misappropriation of military contracts. Accepting private defense kickbacks. Multiple unauthorized consulting fees funneled through shell corporations during his final years of service. He had been under secret investigation for corruption. My stomach twisted. I read further. The most gut-wrenching part? My father wasn't just stealing. He was naming me as a potential co-conspirator. My name appeared on several shell companies he registered, using my identity, my social security number. Without my knowledge, my own father had quietly planted evidence that, if discovered, could have destroyed my career before it even began. That's why he had been so desperate to keep me small. The higher I climbed, the more dangerous it became for him. My promotions weren't just an insult. They were a direct threat to his survival. I sat there, frozen, as tears streamed down my face. He hadn't just doubted me. He hadn't just been disappointed. He had tried to ruin me. And Emily? Had she known? Was she part of it? Or was she just another pawn in his perfect image campaign? I closed the file, my hands trembling. This wasn't just family tension. This was treason. Federal-level corruption that could land my father behind bars for the rest of his life. And suddenly, the ceremony made perfect sense. His fear wasn't about my success. It was about exposure. The higher I rose, the closer I came to the truth. And now, I held it all in my hands. The weight of that file sat on my chest like a boulder. My whole life, I had fought for their approval. I enlisted to make them proud, to prove I was worthy of the Bennett name. All the nights I sat on foreign soil, missing birthdays, missing holidays, missing life, it was all for them. And they were the ones who tried to destroy me. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my father's cold stare haunted me. My mother's nervous glances. Emily's confused face. They all blurred into one suffocating image of betrayal. By dawn, my phone rang. It was Emily. I hesitated before answering. Hey. Can we talk? She said, her voice surprisingly gentle. Sure. Not on base. Somewhere private. We agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town. She was already seated when I arrived, nervously stirring a cup she hadn't touched. Her uniform looked crisp, perfect as always. But there was a vulnerability in her eyes I had never seen before. I figured you found it, she whispered. I froze. You knew. Tears welled in her eyes instantly. Jess. I didn't know everything. Not at first. I thought Dad was just bending rules. You know how he always said the system was rigged against us? That he deserved more after everything he sacrificed. I shook my head, my voice tight. This wasn't bending rules, Emily. He laundered millions through illegal contracts. And he used my name to cover his tracks. Her lower lip trembled. I didn't know he used your ID.
I swear.
I only found out a year ago. He promised it would never come back to you. You believed him? I wanted to. She wiped her eyes. He's our father. No, I whispered.
He's your father.
To me, he's the man who tried to bury me to protect himself. The silence between us was unbearable. I tried to stop him, she whispered. But you know, Mom. She wouldn't hear it. She said you were never meant to climb this high. That it would ruin everything if people knew what Dad did. I clenched my fists, my voice breaking. Ruin everything? Emily, do you understand what could have happened? I could have lost my entire career. My clearance. My freedom. My life. Her tears fell freely now. I know.
God, I know. I'm sorry, Jess.
I thought if I kept quiet, maybe it would blow over. But when you showed up at my ceremony, and I saw those stars on your shoulders, I knew it was only a matter of time. She looked up at me, pleading. What are you going to do? I leaned back, my chest heaving. That was the question, wasn't it? For days, I wrestled with it. I could report my father. Turn over the files. Let the system bring him down. It would be justice. It would be right. But it would also destroy Emily's career. Her promotion. Her future. And my mother? The woman who stood by him. Who protected his crimes. She would crumble. The entire Bennett name, the legacy they worshipped, would be ruined forever. I wasn't sure if I could live with that kind of destruction, even if they deserved it. Was my revenge worth burning everything down? That weekend, I received another unexpected call, this time from a number I hadn't seen in years. General Bennett, the voice asked. Yes. This is Director Carson from Internal Affairs. We need to speak in person. I swallowed hard. It was no longer just a family secret. The investigation had found its way back to me. We met at a secured facility off base. Director Carson was calm, but firm. We've been tracking your father's financial movements for years, he said, sliding another folder across the table. We had our suspicions about the shell companies, but until you reached your current rank, we didn't have full access to the interagency files tied to your deployments. It was enlightening. I opened the folder. More evidence. More damning proof. I assume you're here because you need my testimony. Yes, ma'am. But more than that, we need your decision. I looked up confused. He continued, we can pursue this formally. Full investigation. Court-martial. Prison time. But given your family's legacy and your sister's current standing, we're giving you an opportunity. You can either press forward or you can quietly sign a sealed immunity agreement. Your father's retirement would be revoked, funds seized quietly. No public trial. No headlines. No stain on your sister's career.
He paused.
You hold all the power, General. I stared at the folder, my hands trembling. They were offering me control. The kind of power my father had always sought, but now, it sat in my lap. I could destroy him completely. Or I could walk away and let him fade quietly into shame without destroying what was left of my family. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my reflection in the window. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a soldier. I felt like a daughter, broken, exhausted, and torn between justice and mercy. Finally, I whispered aloud, Dad, you don't get to define me anymore. But I won't become you either. I picked up the phone and called Director Carson. I'll sign the immunity deal, I said. But on one condition. He waited. My father never steps foot near another military contract again. And my name is wiped completely from every document he ever touched. It's done, Carson replied. And just like that, it was over. Or so I thought. Because the real emotional reckoning, the one I never expected, was still waiting for me. 2 days after signing the immunity deal, I received a text from my father.
Dinner. Tomorrow.
7 p.m. Your mother wants peace.
Peace.
The word almost made me laugh. After years of emotional warfare, betrayal, and hidden crimes, my father had the audacity to ask for peace. But I went. Not because I wanted to forgive. I went because I needed to face him, fully armed with the truth, without fear, without begging for his approval. When I arrived at my childhood home, everything looked the same. The manicured lawn, the polished windows, the framed military portraits lining the hallway like some twisted shrine. Except now, one of those photos was mine, my promotion ceremony as general. A photo they could no longer hide. My mother greeted me at the door. She was wearing her usual soft smile, but her eyes were hollow. "Jessica, I'm so glad you came."
I didn't respond.
In the dining room, my father sat at the head of the table like a king waiting for his court. His posture was stiff, his face carefully neutral, but his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, burned into me. We ate in tense silence for the first few minutes. The clinking of silverware was the only sound. Finally, he spoke. "You could have destroyed me, Jessica." I set my fork down and looked him directly in the eye. "You destroyed yourself. I simply chose not to finish what you started." He exhaled sharply, as if disappointed that I hadn't crumbled under his gaze. "I did what I had to do for this family," he said. "For your mother. For Emily. For our name." "No," I shot back. "You did it for yourself. You cared more about power than about being a father." My mother interjected softly. "Jessica, please." He was under a lot of pressure. Pressure? I almost laughed. "We were all under pressure, Mom. I went to war while you both sat here protecting his lies." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Don't you dare judge me. You wouldn't have half the career you have without the opportunities one made possible." I leaned forward, voice shaking but firm. "I didn't need your opportunities. I built my career while you tried to sabotage it behind my back. Do you have any idea what it felt like every time you called me a disappointment? Every time you praised Emily while pretending I didn't exist?" He said nothing. The air grew thick with unspoken truths. "You used my name, my identity," I whispered, my voice breaking now. "You risked my freedom for your greed." For the first time, his mask cracked. His voice softened, almost pleading. "I didn't think you'd make it this far. You were never supposed to get this high. I thought if you stayed low, it would never catch up to you." Those words pierced me deeper than any battlefield injury ever had. "You never believed in me," I whispered. "I was trying to protect you," he said weakly. "By sabotaging me?" I laughed bitterly. "By branding me a failure my entire life? You weren't protecting me. You were protecting yourself from me." He lowered his gaze. I stood up, unable to sit any longer under that roof. "This isn't my shame to carry anymore," I said, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. "You may have kept your freedom, but you lost your family." My mother sobbed quietly at the table. "Jessica, please don't walk out," she begged. But I was already walking. Out the door. Away from years of manipulation. Away from a father who had stolen my pride, my name, and my trust. The truth had finally been spoken, and nothing was left but ashes. When I reached my car, I broke. My hands trembled against the steering wheel as the tears came harder than I could stop. But it wasn't grief. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was release. For the first time in years, I wasn't fighting for their approval. I didn't need it. I had survived their betrayal. I had risen on my own terms. And as I sat there beneath the dark night sky, one thought filled my soul. I am free. The following weeks were strange. There were no public headlines, no breaking news, no scandal that rocked my family's name. My father quietly resigned from his remaining contracts, his pension slashed, his legacy dismantled behind closed doors. The system spared him from public disgrace, but not from living with the knowledge that everything he built had collapsed from within. He still lived in that same house. The same stiff dinners. The same hollow conversations with my mother, who tried desperately to pretend that life was normal. But I never returned. Emily, though, was different. One afternoon, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. No uniform, no medals, just my little sister, standing at my door with swollen eyes and a trembling voice. "Jess, can I come in?" I nodded. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she broke it. "I got the full report from Internal Affairs. About everything." I nodded. "I figured you would." Her voice cracked. "I'm so ashamed. I don't even know who we were protecting anymore." I looked at her gently. "We weren't protecting anyone, Em. We were enabling him." She wiped her face, shaking her head. "I spent so long trying to be the perfect daughter, the golden child, following his every rule, believing his every lie. And I spent just as long trying to earn his love," I whispered, "trying to prove that I was enough." Her eyes filled again. "You were always more than enough, Jess. You were stronger than all of us." I took her hand. For the first time in years, we weren't sisters trapped in our father's shadow. We were simply two women trying to heal. "You know," I said softly, "when that base commander looked at me and said, 'Ma'am, you're the general?' For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged. Not because of Dad, not because of anyone else, but because I earned it." Emily nodded, squeezing my hand. "You did, and I'm proud of you." It was the first time she had ever said that. And God, it meant more than I ever expected. A month later, I stood on stage at a military leadership conference. Hundreds of young cadets sat in the audience, eyes wide with ambition, hanging on my every word. I share my story, not every brutal detail, but enough to make them understand the truth that took me years to learn. "Your worth," I said, my voice strong, "is not defined by your family's name, or your parents' approval, or even the medals on your chest. Your worth is something you build inside yourself, one battle at a time. You do not owe anyone your silence in exchange for love." The room was completely still, and then the applause erupted. As I stepped down from the stage, a young woman in uniform approached me with tears in her eyes. "Ma'am, thank you," she whispered. "I've been living my life for my father's expectations. But after hearing you today, I realize it's okay to live for me." I smiled softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to carry their weight anymore. You get to write your own story." Later that evening, I sat alone in my apartment, reflecting on the journey, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the years I lost trying to be someone I thought they wanted. I thought about my father, living with his silent shame, my mother, desperately clinging to the image of a perfect family, and Emily, finally breaking free from the illusion. They all chose their paths. And now I had chosen mine. My name is Jessica Bennett. I am 36 years old. I am a general in the United States military. And I am free. Free from their expectations. Free from their control. Free from their lies. I smiled through the tears that fell, feeling lighter than I ever had before. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't public disgrace or fiery confrontation. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply this: becoming everything they said you never could be.